We welcome everybody with us, both in our live audience and in our digital audience this evening. We're talking about, this is the season really for people to begin seriously considering gardening. Now you have the typical hobby garden, the good times garden. We're going to be talking about survival gardening, and it's a different mindset and a different way of looking at it. And it's vital if you're really concerned about provident living and self-reliant living that you understand the difference. And we'll be talking about what you have to do to be ready for survival gardening. So where does this class fit into our self-reliant living? Well, as you know, there's a lot of different classes, things that we teach. And of course, there's many things that other people teach. Opportunities for learning are all around. In the nutrition section, it's divided into what you would traditionally think of nutrition, and then you also have gardening, which is nutrition where you produce your own food. The mission, as always, has been to reach and teach the principles. And what I'll be talking about so much in this is principles and things you have to be concerned about, looking at, thinking about that may be different than you have considered. Provident living has to be backed up to principles, not just lists of things, but an understanding of how and why things work. That is the key to self-reliance. These foundational laws we talk about, well, the law of provident living, spiritual, attitude, knowledge, and stuff for anybody that's new. Please understand it's vital. In fact, we'll be touching on this, looking at some details on that from a little different perspective. The law of stewardship is a very important one. And then we look at this with the three parts. It's authority, responsibility, and accountability. We all have the authority since we're alive. We have the responsibility to act properly, and then we will be held accountable for everything that we do or don't do. And hopefully the accountability is one that's enjoyable. It's actually very rewarding for having done what you're supposed to do. The law of the parachute, easy concept. Jump out of a plane without a parachute, you have a big problem. Not for very long, it ends pretty quick. But when you take a look at disasters and emergencies, you have to be prepared beforehand, and everything has to work out properly, just like jumping out of a plane without a parachute, except now we're talking about attitudes, knowledge, skills, and supplies, because once a disaster has occurred, it has no responsibility for your well-being. That's completely upon each one of our own shoulders. Within this idea of preparedness, when we look at principles, there's actually a lot of them. These are some of the foundational principles, these 8 that we talk about classes. You can learn about those and other principles online on the website, Foundation Class 1001. It is free. It is available all the time for you to watch. You can join us there for that at any time. Send people there. Find it on the website under the webcasts button. Open that up, go to past webcasts, and you will see 9 of these in each one. The other way to get more information on principles and foundational concepts, there's a DVD that's a part of the Self-Reliance series. It's part 1, The Foundation. It's a 2-hour principle-based DVD that's available at modest cost. We'd like everybody to be able to afford to get these things. These 9 preparedness modules, I talk about them as modules. They're kind of independent unto themselves within that area, but they all have to fit together. They make a whole, and every area of your life is represented within this. We're not just talking emergencies, but day-to-day living. And of course, in this case, we're talking about nutrition as one of those 9. Now, true preparedness is based on principles. It isn't just about lists of things. Just buying a bunch of stuff is not going to get you through when it gets really bad. It's what's inside of your head. It's what's inside of your heart. You see, what you know and what you can do is far more important than the things that you have. By the way, you do want to have stuff, but you have to be prepared to deal with minimal things. What if you lose them? What if they're destroyed? Principles and preparations for survival gardening, it really needs to be looked at as a lifestyle, because you see failed nutrition both before or during, even after emergencies. Whether it's by error, by its mistake, whether you haven't, just ignorant, what it does, it sets the stage for you to lose your strength, to lose your health when you need it the most. And so we look at nutrition as an extremely important thing. And you need to start now. It's not something that you wait until you're in high stress that you want to start eating good food, but you have to be prepared to maintain that no matter what. When we consider gardening, we're several generations away from the need, plus the everyday experience of producing our own food. And that's a problem. You see, we just don't have the experience in most people. And if a growing part are all of your staples, and when we talk about staples, we're not just talking some salad greens here. We're talking about the things that really sustain your life. The the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fats, the oils, the lipids, those kinds of things. If that's going to make the difference, being able to produce all or most of them, between comfort and misery, between sickness or health, or life and death, then it's important that you are ready beforehand. It's like a parachute. You've got to have it before you need it. You have to know how to use it. You have to actually use it. Darn well better be a good one, otherwise you're in trouble. Modern day farming and gardening practices, you see the approach that's used, the tools, the supplies, all the materials that go into this are not sustainable. They're not even sustainable now, really. We're running into more and more trouble with keeping this going at the rate we've been doing. And the problem is that when things break down, it gets worse. You see, it requires vast amounts of fossil fuels and water. We are consuming a huge amount of raw materials. You have all the communications and all the transportation that goes into it. It's a very vast and complex infrastructure of these things to keep our farms going and our gardens the way most people garden. And so if you say, well, we'll just keep doing what we're doing, when the system breaks, for whatever reason, even for just short periods of time, it begins to shut these things down. If it turns out to be long-term, then things start to grind to a halt. And you just cannot maintain 100,000 pigs with what you grow on your own farm. Things are trucked in from hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles away. Things come to them for our farms and for our ranches in those areas. So we have a system that's not sustainable, especially if the system, the infrastructure is damaged or shut down, but it's not even long-term sustainable the way we're doing it. We're starting to learn some of those things. If you take a look at it from a grid-down perspective, you have to come at it with a different set of mindsets about these things and a different kind of a commitment to it. And really, it's about attitude. The attitude is what's critically important, because if you don't come at it with a kind of a different set of ways of looking at it, you get yourself into trouble in a hurry. In fact, failure can be guaranteed. We take a look at attitude. A equals L or D. What do I mean by that? Well, please understand this. Let me define for you attitude. Attitude is how you emotionally respond or react to what's going on around you, especially when things are completely out of your control. And if you react to things wrongly, if you become angry, if you become depressed or what have you, that might give you an idea of what these terms are up here, what these letters are. A, attitude, L for life, D for death. You see, your attitude when things get really, really tough, your beliefs, how you have an outlook on the world is going to make all the difference in the world. So one of the things that you need to do in preparation for gardening is obtain and study an attitude library. And these books have nothing whatsoever to do with gardening, these first ones we look at, but they have everything to do whether you're going to make a decision to make it or not. Now, the top three that I talk about all the time, Deep Survival, Miracle in the Andes, and The Raft. There are other wonderful books out there, and we talk about those at other times, and I would refer you to both some other classes and things that I talk about these things, and of course you can learn from many other people too. That foundation class 1001 that's online, you can review that. That's Prepare to Survive No Matter What, and it is developing you. Foundation class 1101, Core Principles for Self-Reliant Living. Foundation class 1003. We're in this together, and it really is about developing things together: outreach, communications, cooperation, community. Foundation class 1105, which is your library, and then another class 1205, Surviving Against All Odds. You see, when it really, really gets tough, and if you don't have a firm spiritual foundation and you lose your attitude, you simply die. You quit, you give up, you stop. You don't keep going. And that happens all the time, even now. Now, we're talking about gardening here. And if you want to have a successful garden, there's three main areas that you have to look at. One is your personal garden beatitudes, the needs of the garden and tools. And if you fail at any one of these three, then things break down and the whole process will fail for you. So talking about these beatitudes, I chose beatitudes for a very specific reason. You have to have purpose. Purpose is critical. In fact, when you study the attitude books, the reason that people survive impossible situations is they have a purpose. What we're talking about there, that's a reason, the need. That's the why you do what you do. You need to know why you want to do whatever you have to do to make it. The next part of it is passion. Passion. What is passion all about? Passion is about commitment. It's about a commitment to the purpose. You see, if you don't have a commitment to the purpose because of the passion that burns within you, then you just quit, you stop. Next, we have integrity. Integrity sometimes is, it may be misunderstood. We're not just talking about honesty here, although it's that, but some ways it's honesty to yourself. And really what we're talking about is change and the need for change. You see, when you take a look at things the way they really are and you go like, oh my heck, I've got to deal with this. That's when integrity has to kick in, because a lot of times people will look at things and simply say, oh, it can't be that bad. Or surely somebody will come rescue my hiney. Integrity says when you look at things and you say, hey, this is not going to work, this is going poorly, it's up to me, I've got to change and do things differently. And if you'll notice, these really work from the top down. The purpose and the reason leads, and if you have passion that ties with that, it goes to commitment. You can have commitment to integrity to make the changes. Humility is another one that is extremely important, but what this leads to is the knowledge, or I should say the quest for knowledge. In other words, realizing you don't know everything you need to know and can't do everything that you perhaps think you can do, and now you need the knowledge so you can fix that. And if you have the integrity to say, I need to do that, and the humility to make the changes and gain the knowledge, then you can go forward. Courage. Courage, this is courage that comes from the purpose. If you have a purpose and if you have commitment to that purpose, you see, courage is not about being fearless. Actually, the people that have no fear usually are the ones that end up dead the soonest, because they do really dumb things. The bottom line is, if you have a commitment to the purpose, you have a reason, then you can go forward, and it may be very daunting situations, but you can move forward, and you'll do it in such a way that you have a better chance of making it through. Of course, we're still talking about gardening here, but it fits very well. Discipline. What does this mean? Really, it's about work ethic. And again, this comes back to the commitment. Am I willing to do what it takes? Because if you're having to produce most or all of your own foods, this is not an easy thing to do. This is a daunting task, and it will take a work ethic to be able to pull that off. Patience sort of makes sense that you'd want that in there, because if you become impatient and you go around and stomp on the plants because they're not growing fast enough, well, that'll stop it from working. And it's really patience for the outcome. It is about enduring, but this also comes from the commitment, because you're going to see things through. And then the one that almost doesn't look like it fits very well. It's actually foundational for all of it. In fact, if you'll look at purpose, and then you put at the other end of this forgiveness, and what do I mean by that? Well, really, it's all about love. Now, we'll talk a little more about this in a few moments, because it's like, you know, what do you have to do? Love the plants? Well, you better. How about insects and those things that are chewing on your things? You're going to get mad at them? No, they need to live too. There's reasons why you have to be filled with a sense of it will be okay, and I'm not going to be ground up in these things, and I'm not going to become reactive to them. You see, all of these things, look at them from the standpoint of attitude. Because if you lose your attitude when it gets tough, you lose your life. You want to be practicing these things, living them every day, until they actually become attributes of who you are. Now, I'm going to focus on some key immediate beatitudes for survival gardening. When we take a look at the integrity, which leads to change and doing things differently than need to change, and then you consider this fact right here, what I consider the truth about life, there's no doubt that tomorrow will come, and there's no dispute that things happen. You'll have to understand that things do happen. They always have, they always will. But how you're prepared to meet tomorrow will make all the difference in the world. If you're prepared for the worst, I look at things from the worst case perspective. It will take time so that you can, in fact, make it no matter what. Humility, this thing about knowledge and searching for knowledge. Well, what is knowledge? You take a look at the law of provident living, top-down, spiritual attitude, knowledge stuff. Knowledge is K equals I times E. What do I mean by that when we talk about knowledge? K equals I times E. Let's be sure we have this definition down. Knowledge equals information multiplied by experience. You see, I can share no knowledge with anybody. People talk about knowledge in books. There is no knowledge in books. There's a lot of information. It only becomes knowledge when you do something with it, when you apply it, when you use it, because it's then at your fingertips. That's why gaining experience with things is critically important. In this area of gardening, you need experience before. You have to say, well, this time we got to go grow our food because the shelves are empty and the grocery store is shut down and we're all kind of hungry. We better go plant something. Even if there was time to get it done in a hurry, if you don't have the experience and know how to do it properly, the harvest might be poor, it might even fail. So knowledge is critically important that you gather. There are 3 stages to knowledge. And this is extremely important in the gardening area because you have to kind of look at it from this perspective. The 3 stages are strategy, education, and instruction. What do I mean by strategy? Well, this is key words are underlined in here, you'll notice. Grasp the reality of the big picture. This is a 50,000-foot view. This is looking at things from high up. How is it really? Then you develop a realistic plan that deals with the issues. And you have to also be deciding what is your outcome. Now, if your outcome is, if it really gets bad, I hear people say this, if it really, really gets bad, I don't know that I want to survive. Okay, that's an easy one to accomplish. Don't do anything. But if you have a reason to survive no matter what, then you've got to get an idea of what the reality is, and you have to have a realistic plan to deal with it and not just saying, well, somebody's going to come rescue me. That's not realistic. So you obtain and study a strategy library. Now remember, strategy is a 50,000-foot view. Here are some of my strategy books. These are not gardening books. I do have a gardening strategy book in just a moment. My favorite one of these, if you can only have one, is 1 Second After. We've done a review on that. We'll talk about that some more. This is mainly to give you an idea of exactly how bad it can be. What could go on? What might I be facing? This book is written very realistically. It's written, it is a fiction, which we hope never comes true, but it's based on the reality of what could happen, what is likely to happen should we be hit with an EMP attack that's very successful. These other books are also useful to give you an idea when things shut down, but this one will give you kind of the emotional feel for things, and you learn best when there's emotion tied to it, particularly in the strategy area. So I recommend that book very, very highly. I always warn people, it's not exactly a happy book. It's a tough book to read in that respect, but it will make you think. You won't get a lot of laughter in the book, and there's some people you may in fact cry over some things that are in the book, and that would be good if you do, because then you understand what it could be like. I also warn people a little bit. It's written fairly realistically in the sense of some of the language that's used, the way people may in fact speak when they're under a lot of stress. Now, some people may object to that and say, I won't read the book, and that's okay. You don't have to read the book. You can read some of the others. There's no torrid sex scenes in it, and there is not some of the, I'll say some of the worst of the profane words, but some of the more common ones, they're in there. People under stress sometimes speak that way. I learned a few French words some years back. I do my best to avoid them, but every now and then they creep out. Unfortunately, I'm still working on that. Here is my gardening strategy book. This is my favorite gardening book of all. Those of you that have been listening to Tuesday nights, we've been talking about this a great deal. But the first third of this book is all strategy thinking. It's big picture thinking. And that's why I called it a gardening strategy book. And if I could only have one gardening book, this is the one I have. It's both strategy, education, and instruction. Well, education. This is with the big picture in mind. You develop an overall understanding of all the things that are interrelated that you have to do, all of the tools, materials, the skills that you must obtain and that you must learn and work with to give you the outcome that you want. This is like the 10,000-foot view. You come down from 50 to 10,000, so you need and study an education library. Well, these 3 books would be some of the best that you could get. They all are fairly similar. I don't have one that's a favorite in there, but if you add all 3 of them, they overlap, but there's also unique things in each one of them. I have all 3 of them. They prove to be very valuable. So you come down a little closer. There's not extreme details in it because it's a book. Each one of these things touches on hundreds of different things. Any one of them you could write a book about. But it will get you a little closer to this interrelationship of all the details of what you have to do. Instruction. Now again, this is with the big picture in mind, along with the commitment that you've made to the outcome that you want. Now you, keyword, develop and practice the details of these different skills and processes, the tools, the materials. It's hands-on. Your hands are in the dirt. We've gone from 10,000 feet to our hands are in the dirt right now. In the case of gardening, literally in the dirt. When we take a look at the instruction library, you need to obtain, and I would recommend you have all of these books, although once again, if I could only have one, it would be The Resilient Gardener with Carol Depp. It will cover most of what you need. It does things that no other book does. That's why I like this book so much. And it's been a delight working with Carol. And by the way, we're going to have some more programs from her that will be edited, compiled, and put together to go along with the book here in the future. Now, you need to get knowledge now. Remember what knowledge is? It's information. Those books are full of information. You need to turn that into knowledge by doing things now. And you learn from the garden while it's easy. While it's easy to do these things, planting and growing. And you also need to be learning some of the new things. And if you'll take a look at the Resilient Gardener, that's the pattern you want to follow. That's the strategy, the education, and the instruction that I would choose to follow. In fact, it's exactly what I am doing. But you play with things. Now, this is a couple of years ago. That's a kohlrabi plant. I've never grown kohlrabi before. Right now, it's kind of fun to do things. You try some new things, experiment with them, see what you can do. Growing some eggplant and the oyster squash, the patapan squashes, you do these things because they're easy, they're fun. You do as much as you can while you're learning some of the other things you need to do. This is my Hopi Gray squash. It's part of the Three Sisters, not the Hopi Gray particularly, but squash in general is one of the Three Sisters. And you see, you do those things now when a mistake isn't going to kill you. When something goes wrong. If you have a failed harvest right now because you had some great idea, I've had a few of those along the way, because I am experimenting all the time. You know, you look at all these tomato plants, and that's the way that you would like them to be. Well, I had this really cool idea how I was going to grow my tomato plants, and it wasn't going to be nearly as much work, and it was going to be better than before. That's a poor scraggly little thing here, and I had a whole bunch of them, and it's a totally failed idea. Now, one of the things I did learn from this is those plants, even though they were the shabbiest looking things I've ever seen, they still went to fruit. You see, they had a job to do. They had a commitment to produce fruit, to make seeds, to reproduce. That's what they were going to do. And they were the sorriest looking things, but they were tough little rascals, and they managed to put out, I had maybe out of all of my plants, I might have had a pound of tomatoes. What was that, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when that occurs? I didn't get any peppers at all. They completely failed with my great idea of what I thought I was going to do. But I also learned other things as I was planting squashes. Here's two identical types of squash. This is the patapan or the oyster squash. The one on the right is this scraggly little thing, and I don't know why it didn't work. And one of the things that you learn is, well, you always plant more than you think you may need because some of them may fail for whatever reason. Maybe it was just a weak seed. Maybe there was something in the soil at that place, or maybe it was lacking something at that place because that plant never did produce anything. And you gain experience with all kinds of things. I gained experience with what the deer really like to eat in my yard. Absolutely loves green squash. So that was a problem. So I've learned some of the things that I need to do to change. So what is nutrition? Well, it's what makes us go. It's what allows us to grow and stay healthy. It's how an organism will take nutrients and assimilate them and convert them into tissue and energy and the ability to work and do those things. The role of food storage and provident living, you see, food storage is the vehicle to give you proper nutrition during a time of need. But food storage is a little more than just what you put in the pantry that you can use. If you take a look at it, you see food storage or nutrition in general is not just something to eat. You see, it's about giving health and strength to the body. And one of the things to realize is that what we eat and what we drink is the easiest and the most common way in this country to do damage to our body, mind, and souls. The things that we consume are not healthy, nutritious by default. It takes a willful, educated decision about what you will eat and what you will not eat in order to make the choices to have good nutrition. It is literally that old adage that says, you know, you are what you eat and drink. That is very, very true. And it's time to practice eating the right kinds of things now and to understand the principles of empowering nutrition now before something happens, and then make provisions so you can keep having that as long as you need to, no matter what occurs. as long as it takes, and this is where our future food comes in as we talk about them. So yes, you do store foods. You store foods in all the different categories. We talk about these in another class. You store them in the sleeping foods. You have live foods that are available to you. And you may have the convenience foods. You may have the long-term storage foods, a lot of variety. And you learn how to work with those things. You use them now. You cook with them and play with them now. Because what are you going to do when those things fade away, when you've used them all up? You see, nutrition for the future must account for the fact that you will eventually, if things go long enough, exhaust all of your store of foods. And so correct food storage must take into account the ability to replenish those foods. And that's where this idea of gardening comes in. So how much do you store? Well, you have to store enough to get you to the growing season. In other words, if the event occurred about the 1st of October and everything is snowed over and frozen in, you're not going to be growing anything immediately, certainly not a lot. At the moment, it'll be difficult to get things started. So you've got to be able to make it until you can plant, plus you may in fact have a crop. What's the weather going to do? So you need to store enough. And when is there too much that's stored? I'm not sure you can store too much. But you'll have to consider what you need to do to get you to where you can start using these things that are going to become our future foods. And this is future food asleep. We call them seeds. We plant them and wake them up. And then when you learn how to do it properly, you'll have some of them sleeping again so that you can use them again and again. So, isn't this just about gardening? Well, it is. But there's more to growing food than just planting a bunch of seeds in dirt and putting some water on them, because ultimately it is about having a successful harvest. Successful harvest isn't just quantity, it's also quantity. You have to have enough to sustain you and your household, and it needs to be good and nutritious food. So ways to use sleeping foods, and each one of these has its own advantage, and in its time and its place you might want to consider doing them. One way is just to wake them up and eat them. We call that sprouting. Now you have a sleeping food that you've turned into a live food that has some real nutritional benefits. Learn to sprout. This is something you should do. There's a fair amount. One of the other things to do is, of course, you can plant those sleeping foods, those seeds, grow them, and then eat the produce that comes from them. That harvest, which is a lot of fun. Actually, it's very, very satisfying to harvest these things. And when you have a nice bounty, that's really a lot of fun. That's a lot of work too, by the way. You get tired of bending over picking those beans. I'm going to pole beans is what I'm doing, so I don't have to bend over that much. Even though poles are a hassle to put up, as you get a little older, it hurts more to get down and get up and while you're down there. So I'm going to pole beans. I've learned that. Then you can take some of those plants, harvest their own seeds, and plant the next generation. And being able to do that is critically important, because now you have something that's sustainable. Okay, for a successful garden, there are 3 things that you must satisfy: your personal garden attributes, the needs of the garden, and then tools. Those 3 general areas. So let's talk about you first. Now, this almost looks like something we talked about before. As a matter of fact, it's very similar. And it is your relationship, and this is both yourself inside of you and your relationship to the garden and everybody around you. Well, you have to have a reason or purpose to be gardening. This is a lot of work. And so you better know that you have a reason that you want to put in that amount of work. So it is about work ethic. You'll have to have work ethic. You'll have to be consistent and persistent about things, because that garden has to be tended and taken care of. It's about knowledge of how and why things work and what to do, and about every aspect of this process. Here's an idea. Now, don't write this down because I've got it published elsewhere. When you take a look at squash, the winter squashes and the summer squashes and cross-pollination, you see if you're trying to save seeds, this is important. If you're not trying to save seeds to get another generation, if they cross-pollinate, it's not going to affect the generation that you're in right now, but it'll certainly have an effect upon the seeds that'll come from them. So you have these 4 main categories of the squashes, and if you plant too close together, and that may be within 100 feet or 100 yards, depending on the plant. If you plant some of them in this same area in here, of the maximas, and you have 2 or 3 of those in there, and you want to save seeds from them, you're going to get something weird. You know, pumpkins will cross with all kinds of things and other squashes. The first generation, the fruit that you eat, it's going to be okay. But the seeds you save, you have no idea what you're going to get. It may be totally weird. It might actually be great, but in most cases, it's not what you want. So you have to learn about those things, be aware of that, and then plan your strategy so you don't get this cross-pollination that will cause problems. Of course, there's things you can do by self-pollinating and things like that you need to learn. Other fun things to learn, there were things that I didn't know until I started doing more and more of this. My cabbage that I had, and it was fun to grow cabbage and to make coleslaw, to make sauerkraut, those kinds of things, to eat it a variety of ways, cabbage soup and all. So you grow cabbages, but I learned that if after I harvest the head and I leave that big old plant down there, it goes and makes some more heads. I really didn't know that. And so now they're not as big. In this case, this cabbage produced 2 more nice little heads that were just wonderful to eat. So don't destroy, unless you have something you want to plant immediately if you're doing succession planting. But there's things that you'll learn just by getting involved, talking to, listening to, and having fun with the garden. Now, commitment, we've talked about that one. This takes a lot of commitment. But that's going to be based on your purpose, your reason, your passion for doing these things. And if you don't make the purpose, the commitment, you know, it'll just, well, it doesn't work. You also have to have patience. These plants grow slow in some cases. It takes a little while. You have patience to deal with them. And some of the problems that you're going to encounter, you'll have to be patient with them. And then it's going to take the resourcefulness to solve problems when something goes wrong. This is where understanding principles, when you look at a plant that doesn't look all that healthy, you understand what the choices are or what's going on. Maybe it's just one plant, that's not an issue, because you can have a weak seed, it's not a strong plant. But if you have a whole group of plants that are not doing well, is it the soil? Is it the water? Is it the climate? What's going on? Do we have something in the soil shouldn't be there, or have something that needs to be there? You can learn to read the plants and understand them, but you will have to spend some time learning how to do those kinds of things. Principles, let's talk about the garden. This is the next thing you have to pay attention to. The garden is where we normally think all about the garden, but you've got to think about yourself first, because if you don't take care of you and make the commitment, the garden isn't going to take care of itself. So the needs of the garden, and when you take a look at it, they're actually fairly simple in concept. One, of course, is you need a space, you need a location. You need to be considering where you're going to put these things. And you may have to change your location to be sure that you can have the garden that you need. Now, you can have a very large garden. This is looking to the south, and then looking to the north. This is an acre that's been turned into a garden. And it's a very, very nice garden. You may have a yard like this. This is actually my yard, and that's my Hopi gray that's growing out there. That was a lot of fun to grow. Now that thing grows so big and so fast, I was concerned that if I was to go out there, sit by my garden in a chair and fall asleep while reading a book, that thing just might snag me and eat me. I don't know if it's a man-eating plant or not, but this thing's taken over the yard. It was amazing. If you have a squash like that, you may need to have a lot of space. If you don't have a lot of space, you still do what you can do. This is out in the front of my house where I was growing my kohlrabi and some other things. But you might choose a plant that's extremely prolific, such as that little patapan or oyster squash right there. That thing was so prolific, it makes zucchini look like a slacker, was my conclusion. Those things were popping squashes every day. I was harvesting every day. I had 4 of those plants. I was eating them, giving them away, and they're wonderful little mild squashes. You eat them when they're very young and they're very small. You eat the whole thing, and they're just great. So depending on your location, the amount of land that you have may determine what you're able to plant. You may want to do a lot of vertical planting if you don't have a lot of space. So you learn about these things, but you'll need space. The soil, this is the one that's extremely important, because the health of the plants is really dependent on the health of the soil. Vital, living soil. When we talk about soil, we're not talking about dirt. We're talking about the whole combination of things. It's got dirt in it, but a lot of other things in there. And you start having fun with the soil. Now, I'm just literally, I've got to where I can kind of tell how the soil is doing, at least in part. If I sniff my regular old dirt where I haven't been working on it, it's pretty bland smelling. Compost, rich, wonderful stuff. And by the way, I know what goes into that. Actually, a lot of turkey poop is what went in there, really hot stuff. And the shavings and a bunch of other junk and garbage and what have you. And when it's done, it smells good enough to eat. And then my soil smells exactly the same when it's out in the garden. If you take a look at these things, in the middle you see my dirt, pale, very, very, it's a lot of clay in it. And it doesn't grow real well. It grows weeds quite well, but other kinds of things not so well. On the left, that's the compost. On the right is my garden soil, where I've been pouring tons of compost into it for years and building it. There it is again. On the left is the compost. On the right is my garden soil, and the stuff in between is the way it is naturally. You need to be building the soil. The soil is the life of the plants. Seeds, this is your sleeping foods for the future. We start out with our long-term storage of foods that includes the things that are in the larder, so to speak. You add to that the seeds. Properly stored, they can store for very long periods of time. If they're properly dried, they can be in the freezer as they are here. I have quite a number of seeds in my freezer. Now, the seeds that you buy downtown in the packets, they probably don't freeze real well because their humidity is going to be too high. Their moisture can't. They need to be dried further. So store them in the freezer because they end up here and eventually in the harvest, in the kitchen, in the pantry, in the bottles, in the dryer. And this process goes around and around because when you learn how to save the seeds, then you return those seeds back into the garden because eventually your stored foods may in fact go away, at least the ones you originally had. Now you'll be storing for each year and for each winter and for the future. So please consider this a part of your long-term storage, that you have to have those future foods in the refrigerator, or better yet in the freezer when they're properly prepared so they can be frozen. You can take those things out, wake them up slowly is best, and then get them into the garden. Because eventually even they will be used up. You need to be learning how to harvest your own seeds. Now, my favorite book again and again, in fact, if you could only have one, would be The Resilient Gardener. There's other wonderful books to have. Seed to Seed, How to Grow More Vegetables, and the New Seed Starter Handbook. All of these talk about seed saving and some of the processes that are in there. The Resilient Gardener being the one that focuses right on the staples and high value production. I've been experimenting with these things for years and playing with them, learning what to do, not to do, how to have success, and also how to have failure. What you do is you fail your way all the way to success is what you end up doing. So start now. Don't wait until it's a must do or die situation. This is out on the front, and if I remember right, I think that's romaine lettuce right there that I let go to seed. You can take these little squashes. We eat them when they're really small, like that one on the far left over there. That's kind of the best way. Those others are still pretty good. Let them grow to mature and dry out and everything. You can harvest your own seeds. My Hopi gray squash that I harvest seeds from, onion seeds, those kinds of things. And then here's my amaranth, a wonderful productive food because you can eat both the greens and the grain that comes from them. The nutrients, now here again we're talking about to the soil and feeding the life of the soil. You see, soil is not just about dirt. It's about having a strong, healthy soil that has this microcosms that's a mixture of the minerals, the microorganisms, there's fungi, there's water, there's gases that are in it. And it's this web of life that is extremely important. You see, if you don't have any living organisms in the soil, you won't grow any plants on it. Very, very few, if any at all. So it is bacteria and all these different things in there. And what they end up doing is they're taking some of the minerals, some of the things that are inorganic, and they're turning them into water-soluble organic minerals that the plant roots can pick up and utilize. You kill out the bacteria and the worms and the nematodes and all those kinds of things, and the soil does not grow very well. So pay attention to the health of the soil. And we have a class that's taught by some other folks on those things because they have more expertise than I do. When you take a look at some of these little critters, they're absolutely gorgeous. Some of the fungi and some of the bacteria, and also some of these little predator things that are in the soil processing these things. You look at them and they're just amazing. If you lose them, the soil becomes sterile and it doesn't grow well. The bigger ones we can see, these earthworms. Now, a word of caution that I'm quite passionate about, and that's what you put on your soil. We have a tendency in our chemical society wanting to have things happen instantly and take care of things, eradicate every problem. And so we try to poison things into non-existence. Now, if you're taking a look at this is a herbicide that's being mixed right there. If you have to wear a hazmat suit, put your herbicides out and get them ready to go, that ought to be a hint that this might not be good for you or for the soil. We do this continuous spraying, which takes a vast amount of energy and infrastructure to maintain it. What happens if those things go away? The thing that you need to understand is you're doing damage to the whole environment in the soil in particular when we do these things. We're artificially forcing these plants to grow. We're getting production, but our nutrients may not be that great. Consider this. Here is a tree that has been damaged by herbicides that are not supposed to hurt a tree, but yet you get enough of them in there and this thing has this boil and this knot on it that's the result of applications of them. Guess what it does to people also? In some cases it can be horrific, and it actually does DNA damage and it doesn't go away. These chemicals are a real problem, and I would recommend that you stop using them if you are right now. I had my own experience with this. I haven't used hardly any at all, but when we moved to our new home 8 years ago, and it didn't have hardly any grass, it had some out front, the rest of it was pretty rough. And my wife would like to have a nice green lawn to start with anyway, so I decided, well, I'll use a little weed and feed on it. And so I did that. We killed back some of the weeds, but I noticed something very critically important. I only did one area, which was out front in the yard right there. And you know when it rains, all the worms that come up and crawl in the driveway and the sidewalk in those areas. What I observed was this. On the southern side, that'd be the side to the left in the picture up there where that tent is, there were very few worms that were crawling out on the concrete. The worm population was severely diminished. On the other side, that actually had fairly poor soil, looked terrible, didn't have a lot of grass or anything growing in it. When it'd come up and rain, I'd have worms crawling out all over the place in there. And so I just, recommitted myself that I will never put any poisons on it. Eat the dandelions anyway, they're good for you. So you have to learn other ways of approaching this and ways of feeding the soil. One of the main ways of doing that is with compost, taking the organics and putting them back in there. Now you may need to ameliorate, may need to fix your soil by learning what's missing from it. And the thing to do right now is that you would get a soil test so that you'll know what's missing of both the macro minerals and then the micro minerals that are needed, and add those things to the soil now, and then keep returning things back to the soil through composting. And both the compost book, this is my favorite of the compost books right now, and then also within the Resilient Gardener, we'll talk about how you're building your soil. And there's other great books and training in those areas. One of the other things to consider is water, which is literally the liquid of life. And it needs to be in balance for your garden, not too much, not too little. The plants need to have the right amount. If you live in a desert area like we do, where we don't have a lot of rains, we get most of our water in the winter and in the spring months in the form of snow and then later in rain. You may have to consider how I'm going to collect some of that rainwater, some of that meltwater. And so literally collecting it from the roof of your house, from your driveways and gutters might be something you want to consider doing, because if the utility is shut off, I have irrigation water, pressurized irrigation, but if something goes wrong and I don't have that, I've got to collect my own water. So I would recommend you're paying attention to where you might get water from. Water barrels that pick it up from the gutter, you can recycle them yourself, you can build stands for them, and it may give you water to keep your garden going. Now some parts of the country, they don't have that problem. Some parts of the country, it's almost too much water to grow. In others, we are looking for water sources all around us. Sunlight, that's not too hard to figure out. You just have to pay attention. Is it a plant that likes full sun, partial sun, or shade? And then just plant accordingly for those plants. Tools, one of the other things that we need to have. What are tools? What do they do for us? Well, tools in general, they multiply your effort many times over. Whether it's a hand tool or a power tool, the proper tools that we have make a huge amount of difference in our productivity. So having hand tools, and the reason you want to have hand tools is, well, if there's no more gasoline or oil or the equipment breaks down, you just do it it the way people did it for thousands of years, by hand. And you want to learn about some of the tools that you may need. On the right, sometimes called a U-bar or a broad fork, for turning lots of soil, and that's particularly useful if you're doing the double dig method in some of these things. If you do not have the power tools, you've got to have something else to back that up. But the different spades and rakes and hoes, and gain experience with them now. One comment is about buying tools. When you get a tool, get quality ones, get commercial grade, something that's going to last, and then you also get some spare handles. I do buy a lot of used tools. I pick them up at garage sales with broken handles on them. And then I can repair the handle or replace the handle and have a very inexpensive tool, a shovel that I pick up for $1 versus $15 or $20 it might cost me downtown new. Some of the power tools can be very useful. One that I truly love is the little Mantis tiller that I have, and it's been a very, very useful tool. If I was in a long-term shutdown situation, it uses very little fuel, but yet will do an awful lot of work. So I can store fuel to keep it going. Now, I'm not using it to till gigantic areas. If you want to till a large area, you might have to have a large tiller like this. They do use more fuel. But in the tool area, composting is one of these things. This is where I use my little tiller. Here's some of my composting tools, these garbage cans with the bottom cut out that's upside down. I do a composting class and all the different ways of composting. My big bends in the screen. And then this little tiller is the best way to stir and turn your compost. If you want to be working it to get it to compost quickly, then it needs to be turned, and this thing is a marvelous tool for that. I use it for some cultivating and other things, but really I use it for my compost production. Learn how to do this, how to reuse the resources around you and replenish the soil. So nutrition class 5153, recover, reuse, replenish, and rejuvenate. You give to the garden so it'll give back to you. One of the other things you'll have to learn about is pest control. These are the diseases and insects and critters that are going to do harm. And some of these little rascals right here, how do you control them? How do you minimize the number that are trying to attack your plants? 3 years ago, I had an incredible harvest of grasshoppers. I was really considering different ways of eating these guys. I have eaten some grasshoppers. I prefer them fried. Deep fried. I have never tried them fresh. I'm not up to that. I have a friend who does things like that, a guy that I know. But I'm not quite as tough as some guys think I am anyway. But they're pretty good fried. You fry them crispy, and crunch them down. The legs will stick in your throat, so you pull the legs off and throw them away. I'm sure you could grind them up anyway. But you may want to be learning and practicing things that are more natural and how to encourage them. The other thing is about your plants. When you have healthy soil, healthy, strong, vibrant soil that gives you healthy, strong plants, their immune system is stronger. And what you can observe, and I've observed this last year, when I teach another class in this, I have some incredible and extraordinary pictures of insects that are attacking a plant that's a weak plant. And then I have the strong, healthy plants. There's some of the same beetles there, but there's only a few, whereas this one is just covered with hundreds of them. I was shocked at how many were in there, working this poor, weak plant over. Well, it turns out that plants, as they're sick, as they're injured, as they're weak, they may in fact be broadcasting the fact that they're sick and weak and their immune system is down, and it's easier for the insects to go there and the diseases to go there. So here it comes back to building the soil. All the things that you would do to strengthen your soil and build your soil and your plants will reduce the number of insects that you have. You also have to have protection from animals, from weather, from people in some cases that may be scavenging out there. You want to maintain control. It's not about keeping everything for yourself, but it is about controlling that harvest. My squash right here, this was right after we had not all that strong of a frost, but squashes generally don't like frost, and so boy, it just nailed that one right away. And then all the squashes that were on the vine, many of them were covered up in there. That's when I discovered just how much deer damage I did have in there. I had many dozens, I don't know, a couple 100 pounds of squashes that's in there. The deer got most of them. So I learned a lesson that I'm going to have to do more protection. One of the things I do is I do have a dog that's on a run, and she'll have to be closer to that garden to keep the deer out of it. Ending the harvest is another one of the things to consider. And this would be using some other devices like the greenhouse, the warm space that lets you start earlier in the spring and extend further into the winter. You can have a lot of fun with these. And we've taught some classes recently in that. We'll do some more on the details. If you can see the date down there, that is December 10th, 2005. And there's my beet harvest still going in there. At that same period of time, we had fresh beets for Thanksgiving, and we had them for Christmas. Of course, you can store beets when you learn how to do that. They store very, very nicely. And then here's that same little greenhouse on the 13th of March. But you can also learn how to grow. This is something I haven't done much of because the attitude is, hey, in the dead of winter, everything stops growing. Well, you may want to listen to what Caleb Warnick has to say in this book, The Forgotten Skills of Self-Sufficiency Used by the Mormon Pioneers. I've been to his property, and of course we have done some programs with him on this about winter gardening, and he grows throughout the winter using cold frames, hotbeds, and then selecting certain plants, and read about them in this book. It's quite amazing to see these things growing unprotected out in his yard. Now, his yard is not quite as cold as mine, but still he will see temperatures that'll go to 0 and below, and he gardens all winter long. That's something I didn't know you can do. So I would recommend you consider getting that book and also listening to some of the programs that we have had and will have with him and others, because actually people knew how to garden throughout the winter. We've just kind of lost that skill. We don't have to. We import things from Chile and from Argentina, so we don't have to grow them in November and in December. But as a matter of fact, there's a lot of things you can grow that you would think would be impossible. So you can have fun with that. It is about saving the harvest and learning how to do that. Root cellaring, this is the classic by Mike and Nancy Bubel. And I've used this book for many years, and it isn't just about having a root cellar. I don't have one yet, haven't been able to do that quite yet, but there's other processes for cold storage of fruits and vegetables without a root cellar. Of course, one of them is that many of them will overwinter in the ground, such as my beets, if you give them the right kind of protection, if they're not going to be swamped with too much water. And this is in spring. This was April when I was digging my beets here last year. You can also learn about how to dry. Now, this particular kind of dehydrator uses electricity, so I dry a lot of things now with electricity. But the solar dryer is a nice way to go. You can hang things up on a string. You know, what did we do before electricity? There was a lot of drying of things. You can learn how to do those things also. You can take beets, as we had right there. Well, how do you preserve them? Eat them fresh is a great way to go. They can be bottled and canned. We have a lot of wonderful canned beets that we're still eating. You can also dry them, and of course the volume goes down a great deal when you dry them. That bowl of beets will either fill all of those pint jars, or they'll go into that one jar above that has the diced beets that are dried. And by the way, dry the greens also. The leaves and the greens and the stems, I grind them into a powder. It's very nutritious. It goes into the soups and stews. So learn some of these things. It's about your health. It's about your nutrition that you want to get. A very common serious deficiency, and this is about oil, having enough oil. Most people do not have enough of the healthy fatty acids in storage. The main one that I will store is the extra virgin olive oil, first cold press. Get the right kind of, and you can get ones that are very strong tasting, or you can get some that are very mild. I prefer the mild. I think most people do. And I will store that in my freezers, such as here. We have 2 freezers, and if you lift off the things that are on top in there, what do you find on the bottom? Cans and cans of oil, because that will put it essentially into suspended animation, and when the power goes off and they all thaw, now I've got 10 years to use them or longer. So they go into the freezer. That's for long-term storage. But you have a problem. Even if you store as much as I have stored, eventually you'll use it all up. What do? Well, you replenish it. The easiest way is here. It's the sunflower. Sunflowers are quite tough. They grow fairly easily, and they're a beautiful plant. But it is that sunflower kernel that you're looking for, and you want the right kind. You want the ones that produce the oil. Some of them do not produce as much oil as others. And then you simply press them. There are manual oil presses that are available. I'm going to evaluate a couple of them. I also know how to build one of them, that when we finish the plans on them, we'll publish that. So if you can't afford to buy one that's several $100s, then build one. If you have some skills, a little bit of cutting torch and welding and what have you, you can build one using a hydraulic bottle jack that will press your oil. It won't be quite as nice and fancy, but you can take those sunflower kernels and produce your own oil. One of the things I want you to understand is just do this, get this going. And you don't have to be Martha Stewart, you don't have to make it look like Martha Stewart. You know, most of the gardening publications, the magazines and the books and everything, they spend all their time making it look good. And a lot of times they have a staff of people helping them do that. Now you can have a very nice looking yard like this, but you'll spend a lot of time doing that. I had unlimited, and what I found out was I still had an extraordinary harvest, even though I had a lot of weeds. We had a lot of weeds too, but I had an extraordinary harvest simply because I had good soil and we gave it a minimal amount of maintenance. And that is Carol Depp's whole message and why she named the book The Resilient Gardener. It's about being able to make it through tough times, and you may not have all the time that you want. Things may not go well. So don't think in terms of if it isn't really pretty nice rows and there's not a weed within 100 yards of that, that something is wrong. It might look like heck. My bean plants, there's a bean plants in another garden another guy had that looked beautiful. Take a look at one in the lower right-hand corner down there. They're all scruffy looking. As a matter of fact, I had some pests in there that were nibbling on them, yet I still got a lot of green beans. I didn't have time to do the weeding at that time because I have other things more important to do right now with our classes and courses and development. The corn might look really pretty and really pristine, or it might look like that, but I'll tell you what, that corn tasted just as good as the stuff that looked really, really nice when it was growing. So it is not about Martha Stewart kind of looks, it's about the productivity. We produced boatloads of beets from our scruffy looking garden. You might have your squashes all neatly laid out like that, or they might just take over the yard. You still have lots of production. So consider this, even if it doesn't look pretty, grow now while you're learning. Make mistakes now. You might have things that are on ugly old tires like that to give you your containers. They're free. As a matter of fact, they ought to pay you to haul those things off. These guys have to pay big money to dispose of those things. So you can use tires, old culvert pieces and things like this. If that's what you would like to do, you can make it look pretty much any way that you want. You can spend a huge amount of time or a minimal. What this comes down to is this concept, preparing your future by having both a resilient and a sustainable garden. And that means you being resilient and your garden being resilient, and both of you sustainable. The garden will sustain you if you sustain it. Well, that's our class 5150 that fits into this whole series of things. And you take a look at all these classes and the learning opportunities, and even when you're talking about gardening, it's, do I have to know all this stuff, be able to do all these things? And the answer is simply this: in reality, no one person can do everything. That's why it's extremely important that you become a part of a community. So this class, Foundation Class 1106, we're in this together because survival in tough times is truly it's about outreach now, it's about cooperation now and in the future, and it's about building community. How do you do that? We'll give you some concepts on how you might do that. So the loss of food supply infrastructure, all of this transportation and energy and power and communications and computers and internet that bring everything to us, if those things should go away, it won't be a threat to you if you are fully committed to self-reliant living, fully, completely committed to it. If you have knowledge, remember the definition of knowledge. Knowledge isn't information. Knowledge is information multiplied by experience. So you have knowledge of your options and you're playing with them, you're learning right now. If you have knowledge, meaning experience with some of the proper tools, you know how to operate and maintain them. If you have sufficient food in store so that you can make it through the seasons and make it through the period of time it takes to build up your garden, because if you're like me, I don't have a gigantic garden yet. I'm improving the soil in all of my yard. I'm expanding. Every year my garden is bigger each and every year, and I will keep expanding it. But I also may find myself in a situation where I need to plow up the whole yard, get rid of the grass and turn it into corn and squash and beans and things like that. But you'll learn how to do it in a small area so that you'll have a better chance of doing it. But it's going to take a while for it to take off. So you've got to have enough food in storage that you'll make it through the periods of time it takes to get your garden up and running. If you're part of a community, in other words, you might be really, really good at growing corn and squash, but you can't get bean number one. You want a balanced diet. You also want to have the different nutritions and the different tastes and things. Your neighbor might be growing beans like crazy. Well, your community will be one of trading and swapping both things that you grow, sharing of tools, information, and energy. If you learn how to find and create the needed resources, you become a scrounger. Every one of us needs to be kind of like Radar O'Reilly, if you were a MASH fan, where you're finding things, trading for them, turning them up. If you live personal survival beatitudes, all those that we talked about, you've got to change you and your thinking and your outlook. You lose your attitude. If you decide this is too tough, it will be. It'll be too tough and you won't get it done. And one of the other things I think that's important is that you currently produce more than is practical. In other words, push the limits right now. It may be tough. I do more than I really have time to do. But I'm going to do it because I need to learn and I need to expand what I'm doing and get better at it. And I'm just getting into the chickens right now. I've been wanting to do that and get back into it for years. And so an opportunity came up, so now I'm starting with chickens. It's a royal pain, by the way, to do this right now. I'm too busy and it's still snowing and all these kinds of things. I don't have all the structure that I'd like to have, but you know what? The time was right. Do it. Learn right now. The mission is to reach and teach, and that's what we're out to do, and reach as many people as we possibly can about some of these concepts and ideas of self-reliant living. So there's free classes every week. The internet radio that we do on Tuesday nights, and you can go to the website, and there's a link there. Also pay attention to your newsletters. It'll come there so that you can link in on Tuesday nights. I love Tuesday night because I don't have to think all that much. A little bit of preparation, ask some questions, and let the guests do all the talking and all the thinking, and then I get to take notes. I have dozens of pages of notes from these programs. We have our internet video cast that we do every Wednesday night, and you can also attend live here at Cabela's if you would like, if you're close by. We have the free public video archive that's available to you. If you go to the webcasts, you open that up, you have the current one, which would be tonight. You can also open up and go to past ones there. There will always be these 9 overview ones, and other classes we do them will be posted there for a period of time. There'll be some new announcements coming on, some more that'll be available here shortly. We have a newsletter. Recommend that you sign up for that also. It will keep you apprised of some of the classes and courses, and there'll be more information published there. So this is what we do to help as many people as we possibly can, and we would encourage you to be a part of the outreach to assist your family, friends, neighbors, and others about getting ready for whatever might happen. I don't know what it is. Things have always happened. They always will happen in the future, so be ready. The question is this: will you live providently? Well, since you and I have a choice, we can choose what we'll do, but if we make provisions in all of these various areas, these 9 areas that I talk about, and we knowledge about them, experience with them, then we can face the future not with fear and trepidation, but literally with hope, with confidence. And it's not about bring it on because I'm tough, and it's not about I hope nothing happens. It's simply about being, well, you know, I've done the best I can, and I continue doing the best I can. I'm ready to just do everything that I possibly can, and I choose to be okay no matter what, because the truth about life is this: there is no doubt that tomorrow will come, and there's no dispute that things, but how you're prepared to meet tomorrow will make all the difference in the world. If you're prepared for the worst, then no matter what happens, it will. And I do believe that our lives are created to be this experience of learning, of growing, of changing, and literally becoming more and better than we were in the beginning. So again, principles, not just lists of things, not just a bunch of stuff in the basement, but what you know, what you can do with your fingertips is more important than all the stuff. So make it a lifestyle. Play with it. Have fun with it. Do strange things periodically. Kill some plants, not because you want to kill them, but you had some kind of a great idea, you know, and it doesn't work. Well, I know some things not to do. I know some things that work better. And so that's what this is all about. And some of it you'll play with on mountaintops, as we did this last Friday and Saturday, for different kinds of learning and experiences. That's what I encourage you to do. Let me open up the chat room here, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions that people may have. I'm going to clear the chat room so that I can see what comes in. The thing I've learned listening to Carol Depp is really the importance of potatoes. And your comment about war, when things get kind of stripped off above the ground, whether it's insects that do that or whether it's people tramping or what have you, things underground can still be there. The potato is also very drought resistant. And it will, because it's under the ground and it's getting its moisture deep in the ground, it has a tendency to make it through. And so when we get these classes published that I've been doing with her, and you read her book, I have a new appreciation for the potato and also for the nutritional value of the potato. We think of it as this starchy thing, but actually there's a lot of protein in potatoes, and particularly if you're growing your own. And I've done that in the past where I've grown potatoes and let them winter in there and go out and dig them in the winter. God, they're good. They're really, really good. You don't even want to eat a store-bought one anymore after you eat those. And so potatoes is something I'm working on. My soil is very hard. It's heavy in clay, and when it starts to dry out, it turns into, well, it's just about like a Walmart parking lot. I'm working a lot of organic into it and bring in some sand and things like that to break it up so it'll be better at growing things in the ground. It's so hard when I haven't prepared it, the carrots can't penetrate. So you get these scraggly looking things up on top of the ground. Now this last year I'm still eating carrots. I harvested couple of 100 pounds of carrots, and I'm getting ready to start drying a bunch of them because we haven't been able to eat them fresh yet. But I got the soil work so the carrots did wonderfully well in the ground now that I got it broken up and softened up. Okay, I know a family in Walsburg. Walsburg, if you don't know where that is up the canyon towards Heber. It's in a higher and colder area even than where I live. And they're harvesting 10,000 pounds of potatoes from 1 acre. Potatoes can be extremely prolific, and potatoes, see, what are your main staples? You need carbohydrates, starches, you need your fats and your oils, you need proteins. Those are the main things that you're looking for. And in Carol Depp's book, the reason that I became interested, as soon as I saw the subtitle on it, the Resilient Gardener, that's an interesting name. What does that mean? And then I read below that, and it says it's a book for self-reliance in hard times, but the one that caught my attention it was about the 5 essential crops, things that you would grow. That is corn, squash, beans, potatoes, and the flock, the laying flock. That's all about the proteins, about the carbohydrates, and it's all about the lipids. The reason you want eggs is for the omega-3s and the fatty acids, that many plants don't have that. The highest fatty acid, the highest omega-3 generating plant that I know of is purslane, a weed. And it has a great amount of the omega-3s in it, so it's a great plant to eat. But eggs are more pleasant than purslane, by the way. Not that purslane is all that bad, but I really like eggs. So grow them yourself, harvest them yourself. And that's what got my attention about her book when I saw that, because I'm familiar with the 3 sisters. I've talked about and taught about the 3 sisters, which is the Anasazi and the Native Americans. That's corn, beans, and squash. That was their staples. Of course, they harvested meat and fish depending on where they were, and a few other, wild things out there. But primarily it was corn, beans, and squash that they were living off of, because you can store those things very well. So when I saw that, she added potatoes, and I didn't appreciate the potatoes until I've gone through all the instruction with her. And then the eggs, that kind of makes sense also. I always knew about the eggs, but potatoes was something new for me that I really am excited to add in. Well, any other questions? See, beekeeping, yes. Beekeeping is one of those things that would be important to learn about. Each one of us may not be able to do that. I know of several people that keep bees in our area. So I have access to honey, and we also have access to the pollinization that goes on with bees. These bees are being kept in a very natural way, and they keep them away from the highly pesticided and areas like that. So I have a feeling that the bees are going to do a little bit better. So this is why being a part of a community is so important. Can everybody grow everything? I will probably never have a milk cow. It's just impractical for me to do, but I have a couple of neighbors that have cows. We've already done some trading, and we can do some more trade in the future. I will probably never have some other things, but community makes this work. Some people will become the experts in the beekeeping and in the honey and in the exchange and then using them for pollinizing. Anyway, so there are many, many things that are important to learn, and that's why having the strategy book, taking a look at the strategy book, and then you go to the education book, the ones that I talked about there briefly, and these things will be published at other times. You can come back to the website and see them. I have a handout that goes along with this class that I'm working on, and in the future we'll actually have handouts. Those will be posted. There just isn't a lot of time for me to get everything done all at once right now, but you'll be able to see lists of books and things like that. But no one of us can do it all. Community, community, community. Well, let's see here. We're about time where I need to close down and clear out. If there's any last questions or comments real quick, I do appreciate all of you people that do attend. Your emails and feedback are very useful to us. Okay, some places it's illegal to barter foods. Yeah, it may be at the moment. They're losing out on their taxes is what it comes down to. But when it all goes away and the government isn't there, I guess we'll do what we want to do, what we need to do. That's the way it always has been. So in some cases, there may be things that are against code or against law at the moment right now. Unfortunate, but should we get into a very tough situation, a lot of those things won't matter anymore. And that's why you want to be prepared to do things like that. And think about how you might do it in developing that community. You see, individuals don't survive very well very long, but groups and families and communities especially, and community being groups of families that are cooperating and working together can get all your bases covered. Build community. I will see you folks next week, and each and every time we have a presentation. Thank you very much. Have a great evening and good night.